The goal of mapping the complete human brains. Why the brain is more than separate parts? For a long time, people tried to understand the brain by studying individual regions. The hippocampus for memory, the amygdala for emotion, the motor cortex for movement. Different brain areas do have different roles, but it starts to feel incomplete. The brain does not work like isolated boxers. It works through connections. If brain function depends on communication, how much can we understand by only studying the parts separately? What the human connectome actually means. It refers to the complete map of connections in the human brain. It is not just a list of brain regions. It is a map of how they communicate through neural pathways. It's like understanding cities on a map, and also the roads, highways, and traffic patterns between them. The brain's power does not come only from its parts. It comes from how those parts are linked. Why mapping connections matters. Memory, attention, emotion, movement, and decision-making all depend on networks of activity. When one area sends signals to another, information is processed across systems. This changes how we think about brain function. Instead of asking, what does this one region do? Scientists ask, how does it interact with the rest of the brain? The difference between structure and function. Structural connectivity looks at physical pathways, like white matter tracks. Functional connectivity looks at how brain regions activate together during rest or tasks. These are related, but not identical. How scientists study the connectome. Tools like diffusion, MRI estimate white matter fibers, and functional MRI studies activity patterns. These tools help researchers build larger-scale maps of brain networks. The human brain has billions of neurons and trillions of synapses. Mapping every connection at microscopic detail is extremely difficult. Researchers study the connectome at different levels. Why the connectome is so difficult to complete? The human brain is incredibly complex. Connections are not fixed like wires. They can change with learning, development, aging, injury, and experience. Can there ever be one final, complete map? The goal is less about creating one frozen picture and more about understanding the patterns of connection that shape human brain function. A situation that makes this easier to understand: think about learning something new in school. At first, a topic feels disconnected. A definition here, a fact there, maybe a formula somewhere else. But once the ideas connect, understanding becomes easier. Information becomes meaningful through connections. That's why mapping brain connections matters so much. Why brain disorders may be network problems. Conditions like Alzheimer's, depression, autism, and epilepsy may involve disruptions in brain networks. If researchers can understand how healthy networks are organized, they may identify what changes when disease appears. That could lead to earlier diagnosis or more targeted treatment. The goal is not just to make a brain map. It sounds like a technical project. Build the map, label connections, store data, but the real goal is deeper than that. Scientists want to understand how connectivity creates thought, behavior, personality, memory, emotion, and consciousness. If who we are depends partly on connection patterns, then mapping those patterns is also a way of studying the biological structure behind human experience. Why individual connectomes matter. Every person's brain is not wired in exactly the same way. Experience, learning, genetics, environment, and development all shape connections. This means a complete understanding of the connectome may eventually help explain why people think, learn, and respond differently. The role of technology and artificial intelligence. Mapping the connectome produces massive amounts of data. AI can help detect patterns, compare brain networks, and find relationships that may not be obvious at first. But this also creates a challenge. Technology may find patterns before scientists fully understand what those patterns mean. So the future of connectome research depends not just on collecting data, but on interpreting it carefully. The part that feels almost impossible. There is something overwhelming about trying to map the entire brain. It feels like trying to map a city while the roads are constantly changing. Traffic is moving and new routes are forming. But maybe that is exactly why the project matters. The brain is not simple, and understanding it requires methods that can handle complexity. Why this could change neuroscience. If the human connectome becomes more complete, neuroscience could shift from studying isolated brain areas to studying full systems. That could change how researchers understand learning, mental illness, aging, and even recovery after brain injury. It may also help medicine become more personalized, because doctors could compare a person's brain network patterns to typical or disease-related patterns. Final Thoughts. The goal of mapping the complete human connectome is not just to draw a detailed picture of the brain. It is to understand how connections create function. The brain is not only a collection of parts. It is a living network, constantly communicating, adapting, and reorganizing. Once you start thinking about the brain that way, it becomes clear why mapping the connectome could change how we understand memory, behavior, disease, and even what makes each person SE mind unique. Thanks for watching.